Continuing on with the nervous system, we've talked about the brain and the different parts and kind of what they do. We've talked about nerves or neurons, and neurons are actually the nerve cells, so we have to differentiate from that from nerves, which are actually organs. And we're going to talk more about the nerves in this segment. And we divide the nerves into what we call spinal nerves, which we have 31, and 12 cranial nerves. But what we want to do first is draw back and look at a big picture of the nervous system and understand that it is actually a combination of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Now, central nervous system means it's located in the center of the body, and it's made up of the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is to the periphery or side of the central nervous system. So coming off the sides of the spinal cord are spinal nerves, 31, and coming off the brain and brainstem area are 12 cranial nerves. So this is super important to understand, and this chart is fairly simple but extremely important. So here are our parts again: the brain, the spinal cord, the central nervous system, or the CNS, the cranial nerves and spinal nerves, part of the peripheral nervous system. Now notice that I've got these arrows here. What the arrows are demonstrating are the red arrows, which are kind of pointing away from the spinal cord and away from the brain to the other parts of the body. These are the motor neurons or motor fibers, so they're sending information out. And normally when we think motor, we're thinking mostly muscle, so we can move muscle. And then the sensory fibers is receiving information back into the spinal cord or to the brain, or from the spinal cord to the brain, either way. And of course this is receiving sensory information, and we know that different parts of the brain interprets that sensory information. Everything from sight being interpreted in the occipital lobe to most of the touch sensations being interpreted in the parietal lobe of the brain, and the temporal lobe, of course, receiving information for things like auditory or smell, and the parietal also being responsible for taste. Okay, now, so in this picture then what we have again is we have motor neurons going out, and notice the motor fibers going out go to what's called the somatic system or the autonomic nervous system, ANS, sometimes it's abbreviated as. So the somatic system is basically what we have conscious control over. And so notice that under the somatic system we have skeletal muscles, because we basically have conscious control over most of skeletal muscles. The autonomic system is still controlled by the nervous system, but we don't necessarily have conscious control over it. So notice we have two major types of muscle groups here. Here's our three muscle groups overall, but the two muscle groups here: smooth muscle, which lines most of our internal organs such as our blood vessels or our digestive tract, and cardiac muscle also is obviously found in the heart. So we don't necessarily control every heartbeat consciously. Okay, and then we also can send information to glands to cause certain secretions to be secreted, either endocrine or exocrine. All right, now notice then we also have an arrow coming back from the somatic, because we are aware of most sensations coming from the skin, whether it's pain, heat, cold, vibration, pressure. All these are considered somatic or from the skin area because of the nerve endings found in the skin. The nerve endings found in the skin that are heading back to, maybe first go to our spinal cord, but initially end up in our brain for interpretation. Now let's go back here to this autonomic nervous system, or autonomic, which I like to think of as kind of being automatic. We don't really have to think about it. So here we have our smooth muscle and our cardiac muscle and our glands. Now notice we divide our autonomic nervous system up into two different parts: our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. So notice sympathetic, parasympathetic, both part of the autonomic nervous system. Our arrows go to both. Now the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic is the sympathetic would what we would call our fight or flight, and our parasympathetic would what was sometimes termed your rest and digest. So this is what is stimulated when we're in an emergency. This hopefully is what's stimulated when we're out of the emergency, just doing our daily activities, whatever they may be. So the next picture I'm going to show you is of the autonomic nervous system contrasting the sympathetic nervous system from the parasympathetic division of the nervous system. Okay, notice over here we have our sympathetic division, here we have our parasympathetic division. Now, our sympathetic division, and again, look, here's my central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, but here's actually the peripheral nervous system. In this case, over here, it's all spinal nerves coming off of the actual spinal cord and running to these areas called ganglia. Now, remember, ganglia are found outside of the central nervous system, and this is an area where we're having a bunch of synapses. So here we see some actual synapses in this area here where the axons of these nerves and neurons are releasing neurotransmitters, and the dendrites or nerve cell bodies are receiving the information and then deciding whether to send the information to the actual organ or gland. Okay, so here, notice I don't have any cervical nerves in play for my sympathetic. I have thoracic nerves. I have lumbar nerves. Okay, now, so they're running from the central nervous system to a ganglia and then synapsing there, and then if need be, they are further being sent to either other ganglion or directly to the organ. Now look at my organs here. Notice I don't have any skeletal muscle here because that's part of the somatic nervous system, and remember we're talking about the autonomic, made up of sympathetic and parasympathetic. So looking here, we said sympathetic was fight or flight, so that means that all these nerves are basically going to do something to prepare me for the emergency. Now, I think the most obvious thing that would probably happen if we have some sort of adrenaline rush where we're in an emergency is, first of all, we're going to secrete adrenaline. Second of all, our heart is definitely going to speed up due to a combination of things. One, we're going to have nerves that run to the heart to speed it up, and our adrenaline's even going to cause it to speed up. Now, another thing is, when we're in the emergency, we're going to need more glucose, so we're going to stimulate our glycogen reserves in our liver to actually release more glucose. Okay, we also are going to need more air and oxygen for the emergency, so our bronchial areas that have smooth muscle around them are going to be relaxed so that airways will dilate. More air will obviously come in. We're going to really start shutting down our digestive system when we're in the emergency, because we really don't need our blood in here absorbing food. We need our blood shunted to our muscles to get us through the emergency. So notice I'm going to inhibit activities of things that really don't have to do with getting through the emergency. Like I'm going to inhibit the digestive tract. Since my digestive tract is inhibited, I can inhibit my my salivary glands because I don't really need the saliva. My pupils are going to dilate to hopefully help me see better, especially if it's a low-lit, dim situation. I'm also going to, my kidneys aren't going to need to be worrying about making as much urine, so I'm going to inhibit the urination and stuff because that really doesn't have anything to do with getting through the emergency. All right, now, when we are through the emergency, then we don't want this thing to dominate when the emergency is over. We want it to kind of be shut down, so to speak. So our parasympathetic division will operate again, and what it will do the opposite of pretty much everything the sympathetic fight or flight did. That's why we call it rest and digest. Well, we don't want our hearts going fast forever, so we want it to slow back down. So this nerve right here, which is one of your cranial nerves, it actually just has several branches to a lot of this. So notice it's actually coming from the cranial area where we didn't have anything, and the sympathetic from the cranial area. But notice it's branching and actually going to several places. And if you'll notice, the theme of what it's primarily doing is actually getting us ready, especially slowing the heart rate down, but getting us ready to be able to digest our food again. So rest and digest. And hopefully, as a matter of fact, this vagus nerve keeps a brake on the heart under normal situations. The heart would beat much faster on its own if we didn't keep this vagus nerve brake on it. So if something damages that vagus nerve, one of the symptoms could be the heart automatically starts speeding up, even though you're not necessarily in an emergency situation. Okay, so the vagus nerve is going to, for digest, we want saliva. So we're going to stimulate that where that comes back up. And by the way, when our sympathetic division, we probably all experienced a time when we were nervous. Maybe we had to give a speech or do something that kind of scared us, and our mouth got really, really dry. And that was purely because the sympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic division was kicked in, and it was shutting down our digestive tract. So again, bottom line is we actually have a combination of emergency, non-emergency, nerves that are going to organs, because it's autonomic, to either help us get through the emergency or help us relax and digest after the emergency.